I'm going to just double check with the AV. We're good to go. It was a pretty stressful afternoon trying to get AV sorted. I'm the most technical, non-technical person I know. But first of all, I'd just like to say welcome and thank you so much for joining us tonight. Before we get started, I just have a quick question. Whose very first time ever in this room? Oh, fantastic. Well, welcome to Innovate. I'll give you a little bit of a blurb on who they are in just a moment. But one more question. Who is very, very first time to an all things blockchain meetup? Fantastic. And just keep your hand up if you're very under 6 months into the industry. Fantastic. Okay. I just like to get a sense of who's in the room. So I'm a little bit of breath because I was carrying some chairs. But my name's Danielle Marie. For those of you that don't know me, I am one of the founding members of All Things Blockchain, which is a nonprofit association where we organize free and educational networking events, just like this one that you're at today. Just going to get my little... And it's not working. So, yeah, thank you. I'll try to fix that in just a moment. Can you go to the next slide? All right. So my name is Danielle Marie. I'm one of the founding members of ATB. We founded it in November 2020. I started my journey back then becoming an educator. And so now I deliver accredited courses at registered training organizations across Australia, including TAFE Queensland. And I've been building in the community for the last 3 years. And very excited that we have achieved what we've achieved so far. Can I go to the next slide? I really wish. Oh, is that working now? Is that me? Oh, fantastic. I like it when tech works. So quickly, I'm going to introduce myself. I'm going to bring up Matt Hooper, which is my partner in crime. And then we've got a fantastic presenters, what Matt is going to introduce for you a little bit later. I've already told you a little bit about All Things Blockchain, but essentially our mission is to be an organization that is built by the community. So we are an association and we have a whole bunch of volunteers, which are all these lovely people that are on your faces. I mean, their faces up on the screen. ATB wouldn't happen without the help of all of our volunteers. So I always like to acknowledge them and participating and how they help out with the events. Also, these events wouldn't happen without our sponsors. So I do like to take a moment to acknowledge them. So our main sponsor, which is Innovate, which is the room that you're sitting in the moment. Gav is absolutely amazing. He's one of the community manager here, and they give us the space and all the food and the drinks that you're having tonight. So I think we should give them a little bit of a round of applause and say thank you for the food and the drinks and the space that they offer us, because being in the middle of a bear market and trying to find money right now is not the easiest thing. All these other lovely sponsors that we have are our community sponsors because we have association costs that go with it, and as anybody that operates a business. So they help us cover those costs. So I just like to acknowledge them. If you want to learn more about our sponsors, just go to the ATB website. Now I'm going to bring up my partner in crime, Matt Hooper, who's going to explain who he is, what he does, and introduce the speakers.
Hello, thank you everyone for coming out. I'm Matt. I organise these events with Danielle, and I'm so thrilled to have you all come out tonight. I'm going to count you, but I reckon there's at least 40, which is a great turnout. So thank you for travelling and from coming from far and wide. I think we're up to the next slide, please, Joe. Next slide, please, Joe. We have an excellent array of speakers coming up tonight. Next slide, please, Joe. That's right, he's a busy man. Just before we get to Joni Pirovich, who's our first speaker tonight, we're just going to have a quick recap of what happened last week. A few of you in the room were travelling around with us around the country to Blockchain Australia's Blockchain Week, which I think by most reports was a huge success, certainly the people I talked to. So a quick recap: on the Monday, we were in Sydney at the ASX with mostly people from fintechs, the banks, financial sector, and a range of other organisations. One of the main announcements was on the your right, as you look at this slide there, the announcement of Simon Callaghan as the new Chief Executive of Blockchain Australia. Blockchain Australia is the primary advocacy body we have for blockchain related tech in Australia, as many of you would know. Next slide, please, Joe. On the Wednesday, we then came back up to Brisbane, and we had an excellent day, which was the vision of Amy Rose Goody, who put together most of this program, was to actually get back to grassroots and to do some education for people who are either at that entry level or the middle level of their understanding of blockchain and DLT. So I think that was quite a success. There were workshops for young people, there were breakout rooms, and a whole heap of activities. It was great to see a bunch of teenagers running around with lanyards on, enjoying themselves and learning a bit more about how this tech actually hangs together. And one of the best stories very quickly that I came across was this lady called Raika, who has these kids in NFT project. So it was a wonderful day up in Brisbane for the kids. And then Joe, on the Friday, we moved across to Melbourne. Well, we had a little bit more of a corporate day again, and the clickers come to life, or a clicker has come to life. Thank you. We moved to Melbourne. It was a mixed bag. Melbourne, I couldn't really find, I sat in on all the presentations, couldn't find a singular theme to sort of weave it all together. There was a bit of NFT goodness. We had Lambie up on stage. We had Greg Oakford, who most of you would know, hosting a panel on NFTs. We had our very own Danielle, you'll see in this raw photo that I took on my phone. Danielle was up there on a panel which was titled, What Could Possibly Go Wrong? So that was quite interesting, particularly given the last 24 months in crypto. And so that was a quick wrap of Blockchain Week. I want to quickly announce, as I've got Joni in the wings on the Zoom call, and that tech is going to work, God willing, in a minute. All things blockchain next month. Proud and happy to announce an event on Web3 security, audit, and analysis. So we've actually just today locked in a couple of speakers, which has been a very exciting day for me. I've got the likes of Chainalysis. We've got the likes of Chainalysis, hoping for TRM Labs. We've certainly got Hashlock, and we've certainly got Omnis as well. So very much excited about that. I'm going to press the go button on that in a minute once Joni starts talking. Oh, one more plug. Don't forget AusCryptoCon. It's actually only 4 months and about 3 days away now. It's creeping up on us really quickly. So who is going to AusCryptoCon? Anyone already registered to fly down? A few of the devotees in the space. Well worth it. It's more of a convention style. It's not so much lectures and talks, although there are lectures and talks. It's more of a convention style, very much geared around networking, some good networking to be done across the industry. And our good friends at AusCryptoCon have given ATB members a 20% discount, which is still valid. ATB 23, you can just put that into the discount code box when you're going through the checkout. So I recommend having a look at that. Flights are going to get more expensive as we get closer to November. So I'd be having a look at that. I've had my flights in a com booked for at least a couple of months. I didn't mention that fully to my wife, but she knows, it's in her diary. So my good wife is here in the second row tonight. Thank you, Carmen, for coming. All right, without further ado then, I want to go to one of the most awesome people in blockchain generally worldwide, and her name is Joni Pirovich. Joni, can you hear me? Just get her to unmute.
I can.
Thank you,
can
Joni.
you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you. I've got a room of about 40 or 50 avid listeners here. We're just going to put up your video up on the screen, I think, thanks to our technical guy. While we're doing that, Joni, I think you take it away. And we're so thrilled. A big round of applause for Joni Pirovich, all the way from Melbourne. She's giving up family time tonight. Here she is. She's giving up family time tonight for an hour. She's got up to an hour max with us. And we're really appreciative, Joni, of the messages you're going to bring. So I'll give it over to you.
No, thank you for the warm introduction, and for all of you turning up in Brisbane. It looks like a great event, and I'm sorry to be missing out on that pizza. So I have some short minutes to give an overview, and then Simon and Will are probably going to go into more detail, and then we'll have a Q&A at the end. But my disclaimer is that I am a practicing Australian lawyer, but I'm not your lawyer. So anything that I do say today, please don't take or rely on as legal or tax or financial or life advice, actually. It's a lot of fun being involved in Web3, but as we know, we can all go down the rabbit holes and find ourselves stuck there because it's so interesting. So a couple of the themes that I watch, because it's my job to watch the global state of emerging technologies and the regulation that emerges alongside them, is what the standard setting bodies are putting out. So key of those include IOSCO, which is the International Organization for Securities Commissioners, as well as FATF, which is the global standard setter for money laundering and terrorism financing risks. There's a couple of other international bodies, but these two are really spearheading the key flavors of crypto token regulation that many countries are taking up. So FATF has recently just released a report of its findings. A couple of years ago, it released recommendations on how countries should update their money laundering and terrorism financing laws to prevent and detect those sort of activities on blockchains. Now, since those recommendations have been put out, there hasn't been very good uptake. And this is unfortunate from the perspective of FATF, but those of us in industry consider that there are good reasons for the lack of uptake. So FATF is an organization that is filtered with very, very experienced professionals in traditional finance. And there's not enough appreciation, and this is a genuine criticism of the nuances of this particular technology that justify a nuanced approach to existing measures to prevent money laundering and terrorism financing. So one of the key things that FATF has recommended is the travel rule, which requires a VASP, a virtual asset service provider, to collect the originator and the beneficiary or the recipient information of a crypto token transaction. And this needs to be done before the transaction is actually completed. And it's very difficult to meet this requirement. There's a couple of software providers, Nota Bene in Europe is one of the leaders. So very much encourage you to check out their software. But the FATF review, the 2023 survey that's just come out, has said more than half of member jurisdictions around the world have not taken any steps towards implementing the travel rule. And 75% of jurisdictions are only partially compliant, or they're not compliant with the FATF's virtual asset service provider recommendations released quite a few years ago now. So if you do enjoy some light reading, check out the website. I'll share some of the links with the team, Danielle, Marie, and Matt. Happy to answer any questions on it also, but that's going to be a key area of focus going forward in Australia. We've just had our Attorney General close a consultation for modernisation of our AML-CTF Act, and it does include amendments to get us closer to compliance with the FATF VASP recommendations. So watch that one closely. The other one is IOSCO, and they have also a consultation, but it's still open at the moment. It closes on the 31st of July. And it has, in this consultation paper, it has a litany of issues of the main principles of securities regulation in the main issues with the crypto sector, and that there's basic non-compliance with the principles, let alone the black letter laws around the world. IOSCO, again, they set recommendations, but it's up to the government to implement what they think is appropriate as law in their particular country. Now, one of the things that was the bad behaviours that was very much called out was conflicts of interest in crypto token exchanges. Now, this is where an exchange will take some fees. So if you do a Bitcoin to ETH trade, the fees may be taken in Bitcoin. Now, the exchange may not actually want to speculate on that Bitcoin. It might need to convert it into Australian dollars to meet its Australian dollar expenses. This poses a conflict of interest and is against, well, IOSCO alleges that it's against this main principle, this securities law principles, to avoid conflicts of interest and actually not to trade against the best interests of your customers. So if you can imagine that an exchange is also selling its Bitcoin to customers in its own markets, and the exchange might want to be doing those trades for the best price, and it's got more of an understanding of how the markets are moving, this doesn't look like behavior that is consistent with, acting in the best interests of its customers. BitMEX was called into fire, I suppose, by US regulators a couple of years ago, and it made a statement recently that it separated its treasury function out years ago. It says there's no explanation anymore for this function to still reside within a centralized crypto token exchange's activities. So there are these principles, and again, I'll share the link for this IOSCO consultation report. It's very good. It's in plain language. It's principles based. There are examples that are current in the crypto industry at the moment. So you can really get a sense of sinking your teeth into what the principles mean as they're applied to the crypto sector. And you can try to understand any deficiencies or areas of improvement in your operations and how you might adopt the principles or be able to consult with a lawyer on your Australian specific compliance. The other general one is good governance. And this is about independence of oversight, good record keeping, simple things like having a compliance calendar, understanding when you need to make reports to certain regulators, and compliance with specific laws, such as the requirement under the AML-CTF Act to have an AML program so that you're managing the specific risks of your crypto token business. So those are just some of the global themes that will increasingly start nestling themselves in our common areas of practice, or re-nestling themselves in the context of crypto token businesses. But I guess other themes that are not playing out as specifically yet, because they are nuanced to blockchain businesses that are just naturally global from the get-go, is this question of what is effective geo-blocking. And if you have a token that you want to launch on the Ethereum blockchain, let's say it's a governance token, and you put no restrictions on it, it's ERC20 compliant. So in theory, if a liquidity pool is seeded on a decentralized exchange like Uniswap or SushiSwap, it's available to the global market. Now, this is possible because of the technology functionality, but it's not necessarily legal under every jurisdiction in the world's laws. This is still an emerging understanding, and at least in Australia, the test, it revolves around whether you're carrying on business in Australia and targeting or servicing Australian customers. Now, if you're not collecting information or if you don't have monitoring to try to assess from which jurisdiction people are buying or trading in this token that you've launched, you're not going to have a sense of in which geographies you're doing business and which laws apply or not. And so this question of effective geo-blocking comes up because there may be default rules that are introduced that if you don't effectively geo-block or don't effectively request verified personal information from the people dealing in a token that you might be responsible for, then you could be suffering the penalties of not actively complying with that jurisdiction's laws. So it's handy just to have in the back of your mind which are the jurisdictions that you actually want to involve in your community or in the testing of the particular technology function that may involve a token, and maybe just have a narrow focus initially to launching to one jurisdiction or maybe to a handful, rather than having an at-large, globally accessible product from the get-go, which could very quickly get you into a tough and expensive global compliance burden. Myself, and there's many of us experts around the world, we are here. This is what we love. We stand ready, and we've got a network there should you need it. But it's often cost that holds a lot of startups back from seeking that advice and then doing jurisdiction-specific disclosures. So instead of effective geo-blocking, a practical measure is also just targeted and narrow markets for initial testing phases before you've got enough revenue or reserves to launch in a compliant way in those other jurisdictions. The other big theme, in Australia will see this, is custody. So all I can say is segregation, segregation, segregation. The record keeping is going to be critical to show that for each customer, you can have reliable and up-to-date records that show their individual crypto token unit balances, and that you're observing what the latest risks and issues are in providing a custody service, as well as what those best practice custody service custody practices are. A lot of people have thought cold wallets are, gold standard, but a few months back we had an incident with one of the main providers, Ledger, where actually they did have, or everyone was led to believe that the Ledger head office didn't have access to everybody's keys. Turns out that they possibly do. So any institution or custody provider that was using Ledger now has to revisit the overall security of their practices. And then we've had account abstraction. That standard means that cold storage may not be good anymore, and a warm or a hot form of storage is better, but with permissioning. So what account abstraction basically means is that I can have sole signing authority on my MetaMask wallet for anything less than $1,000 worth, but something more than $5,000 worth needs 3 of my other friends to sign it before it can go ahead. And a whole of wallet drain could need 10 signers. I'm just making these numbers off the top of my head, but depending on your fear and the level of trust that you have with the people around you, or maybe professional service providers, this is how different security practices are emerging. So I'll just pause there to summarize that. Look at the FATF recommendations in the 2023 review report. Look at the IOSCO consultation and reach out to me if you've got any ideas, because I'll be putting a submission in by the 31st of July. Think about how you're managing your conflicts, how you can be better at good governance, and know your markets, know your community, have the most impact there, build up your reserves, and then launch in a compliant way in other jurisdictions. So thank you for the opportunity, and I'll pause there and hand over to the other speakers for now.
Thank you so much, Joni. Yeah, have you got a moment for a couple of questions?
Sure. Yeah, fire
Any
away.
questions from the audience? I know we well understand the capability of the tech to work across borders, so that's definitely something that is challenging. And I love how you started, Joni, with a talk about standards, because coming in here, and the IOSCO mentioned, because that was going to be one of mine, to sort of how do we bring this all together? How do we do this better cross-border? But I did have a hand. Is it Dan, my DGen and undoxed friend up the back?
Hello. Quick question. You were talking about the chat, or yes, yeah. Into the mic. Oh, okay. So you were saying before about geofencing specific access to specific crypto tokens. What is stopping a normal user from masking their origin? So for example, there's nothing stopping me from buying assets overseas, even if I'm not legally allowed to in Australia, by simply using a VPN or some other services like that. We all saw that with the investment in Sam Bankman-Fried's FTX. American customers couldn't really invest in other places, but they simply used their VPN too. So really this idea of geo-blocking does seem quite counterintuitive if everyone can just bypass it with free software.
Yeah, and VPNs, or the practice of using VPNs, has already been identified, at least in Europe and the European Union and the US, as an issue. And because that practice is going on, as well as people just lying if there is a form that requests their jurisdiction or their citizenship, this is meaning that there's discussion that laws are implemented to have verification of identity. And so this is like a gateway issue for us now in the crypto sector, because there's a desire for you to access something that's only available, let's call it to Asian residents and not to Australia or not to the US, but you want in to prevent those markets from accessing the product, at least in the European Union and the US. They don't want to leave it open to chance or to interpretation and new innovative practices, they're using or discussing using a blunt tool of requiring the verification of identity before customers can be onboarded. It's not law yet, but it is being discussed because of those practices.
Thank you, Joni. Any other questions? I know we've got a couple of exchanges in the room, so I was trying to watch their faces when you're talking about custody. We've got SwiftX and we've also got CoinStash. Any other exchanges? Dan, you can't have a follow-up question. I've got to get one from someone else. Danielle, did you have one? Danielle had what she framed as a beginner's question.
I always have the beginner's questions. Your piece of advice for some a startup that is kind of navigating these waters and a governance token, are you going to be a security token, but obviously they're bootstrapping it. What would be your advice for them to try to obtain the best information to navigate these waters that are constantly changing at the moment, but they're about to invest so much time, energy, and money into an idea that they think that blockchain is going to be able to solve within their industry? Like, where would somebody get started?
Well, there's a number of different approaches that I've seen, and none of them are free from risk, because unfortunately the crypto sector has been tainted with the brush of having a culture of non-compliance. So despite that there are a number of really good actors in this space, we're dealing with the perception that we're all unfortunately bad actors. And so some of the more conservative ways of launching a token that I've seen include an NFT with something of a digital good nature linked to it. So this is where you might sell a digital good, and you may down the track plan to turn this or the buyers of the 10,000 piece NFT collection, or it might be a 100 piece NFT collection, into more of a community, and you might switch on governance rights later. But at the time of sale, the intention is that it's the sale of a digital good. It's not something that people hold for the purposes of managing financial return or earning an investment or earning profits from the efforts of others. I think Will's going to go through all of the Australian-based tests for you. But if you go back to basic principles, the sale of goods should not be regulated as a security. So in a digital context, the sale of a digital good should not be regulated as a security, or at least, you know, from the financial services laws that apply, that require proper disclosure, registration with ASIC and so forth. You might still have to do the money laundering and terrorism financing monitoring, because there are specific risks of that in the NFT world. But something that prevents you from having to do that monitoring is having a non-transferable NFT. So the buzzword at the moment is soul-bound tokens. And again, this is a way where you limit the transferability. It's not an instrument that can be traded and therefore not speculated upon by the broader market. So you have time to incubate a community and an idea in a more personalized way. It's not going to scale quickly like what we saw in the 2017 to 2021 periods. We're not in that game anymore. So there's, like I say, a number of methods. Those were just a few, but none of them are completely free from risk at the moment.
Thank you, Joni. Absolutely razor sharp. I have got other questions in the room, but I am being told by my boss that I need to cut it, and we're going to move on. But look, we can provide you Joni's email address maybe, or some contact details. You'll find her online. She is absolutely razor sharp with her insights, and I thank her very much for that. I didn't add earlier that she actually stepped in at 24 hours notice. So thank you very much, Joni, with the withdrawal of another speaker. So we really appreciate you doing that, and I think you deserve a big round of applause from everyone in the room.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And good night. So, Joe, we have next up Will Deeb from Clyde & Co. If you could go back to the slides for us, please, Joe. Will is currently with Clyde & Co. as an associate and formerly of Gaydens. Will advises into financial services regulation, the formation thereof, and has also got a background in, I think it's commercial litigation, if I'm getting my terms right. Is that right? Excellent. Oh, I got that down. I was just preparing that before I came up here. So it is a great pleasure to introduce Will, who's going to talk to some slides, which we'll actually, where's our clicker? We're just a little bit ad hoc tonight. Just roll with us, folks. This is good for me as a project manager. I like things to be structured and in order, but tonight it's an agile project plan that I'm working to. So without rambling anymore, I'm going to hand over to Will Deeb from Clyde and Co.
I'll sit down if that's all right. Well, thank you everyone for coming tonight. It was great to hear from Joni about the sort of overarching themes that are going on at a global level. I'm going to turn it on its head and take you at a very granular level, what's happening in Australia, and talk about our existing regulation playground, and then also what is going to be happening potentially in the upcoming year or so in that playground. So, is that better? Wonderful. Fantastic. So yeah, as I was saying, I'll sort of take you through the current regulatory playground and then sort of canvas where we're heading and what sort of ASIC and some of the regulators are really thinking about when they're considering upcoming regulation. Awesome. So the AFSL. So the current regulatory playground, as I'm calling it, is governed and sort of overarchingly held by the AFSL. That's the Australian Financial Services License. Now, we get a lot of clients coming in saying, I've been told I need an AFSL. What the hell's an AFSL? So the standard that everyone needs to abide by in Australia is that if you're providing a financial service, you need a financial service license. That's pretty simple. The next question we get is, what is a financial service? And that question can be sort of summed up in the question you have to ask yourself, am I dealing in a financial product? The next question I get is, what the hell is a financial product? So the phrase dealing in a financial product is defined within our legislation, and it canvasses things like applying for or acquiring a financial product, issuing a financial product, or making a market in a financial product. And then taking that down a step further, financial product is itself defined, and it's a facility through which a person does one or more of the following things, and that's making a financial investment. So you know that is buying or selling securities, manages financial risk. That's your insurance style products. So, and that extends to things like if you go to JB Hi-Fi, you buy yourself a flash new TV, and they ask you, oh, would you like an extended warranty on that? You say yes, you've acquired a financial product because you're managing that financial risk in relation to that TV. And then lastly, making non-cash payments. That's pretty self-explanatory. Now, I've got up here on the right-hand side of the screen, just a bit of an overview of some of the traditional financial products that we see in the market. That's things like, you know, margin lending, derivatives, foreign exchanges in certain circumstances, deposit and payment products, insurance, carbon units, and then things like managed investment schemes where people are pooling money to do particular things with. So that's sort of the current regulatory environment that we live in. If you provide a financial service, you need the required license. In the Australian financial system, licenses are quite specific. You need a license will tell you exactly what service you can provide and who you can provide it to. So as you may be aware, investors in Australia generally split between wholesale and retail. Retail, think your mum and dad. Wholesale, anything larger than that, like we're talking companies or professional sophisticated investors. If you apply for an AFSL, you will get an AFSL that says you can do certain things for certain people. For example, you can operate a managed investment scheme for wholesale investors. The second you go beyond that remit, you're outside of what your license will provide for, and you'll be in breach of your license obligations. So the current landscape is, as I said, is governed by the AFSL, but ASIC is doing some work in the context of updating that and thinking about how they'll move forward in the context of a decentralized financial regime. I've got some notes here. These are sort of some of the things that we've been observing when we're speaking to ASIC, when we're speaking to AUSTRAC, when we're interacting with the government agencies that are really the policymakers and what they're trying to achieve. So as I mentioned, Australia is looking to establish obligations and operational standards with respect to crypto asset service providers to ensure that they adequately safekeep assets. Now, as Joni mentioned before, there is a big focus on custody, and there's also a really large overarching focus on scam protection. I'm sure all of you have encountered or know someone that has been the victim of a scam. It's an unfortunate reality that that's the environment we're in. And with the advancements coming out of AI, it's only going to get more popular, unfortunately. As we heard on Wednesday, if any of you were there at the Brisbane Blockchain Week, there was a big, one of the sessions was on AI scams, and like some of the stuff that they were saying was pretty scary. So consultation on the design of custody and licensing frameworks will begin mid-2023. So that was on the basis of, I'm sure some of you will be aware, the token mapping sort of exercise that Treasury and government held earlier in the year and at the end of last year. On the back of that exercise, they're speaking to industry professionals about how they think they should sort of structure the upcoming legislation. So Liam Hennessy, who's the partner at Clyde & Co., Liam and I will be headed down to Canberra in a month's time to appear before the Senate, responding to questions from Senate about how they'll be designing or proposing particular legislation. It's really good that they're talking to industry professionals, because at the end of the day, we're the ones who are going to be operating in it. So they really want to get it right. But as I mentioned, their focus is consumer protection as opposed to making the perfect playground for developers or builders, unfortunately. So from Treasury's public reports and then also our conversations with them, it's clear that they're grappling with differentiating types of tokens, and they really want to apply the existing financial services regime at a product level and are highly focused on custody consumer protection. So one thing to note about our Australian's particular financial regulatory system is that we categorize products on a substantive and product level. We don't really look at the external features, we look at what it does. If it's a fancy thing, but at its underlying core, it manages a financial risk, it'll fall into one of those categories and be a financial product that you need an appropriate license for. And from what we're seeing with our discussions with Treasury, it's extremely likely that they're going to continue this approach and apply it to the upcoming potential changes to the AFSL regime. This is in line with other major jurisdictions we're seeing around the world. Think, the UK and the EU. And I'll talk about this in it shortly, but the UK has recently released their bill in relation to financial services, and EU's put out their MiCA bill, which targets the same thing. They're looking to regulate on a product level, not on a external features level. We're also seeing and hearing from Treasury that they're looking to amend the current AFSL regime to achieve their aim of creating a custody and a financial services regime for crypto products, rather than creating an entirely new framework. And for those operating the space, that's good news to hear. Plenty of market participants already have AFSLs, a lot of exchanges, DCEs have the relevant AUSTRAC DCE license. They'll also have their AFSL. And so it's comforting to hear that AUSTRAC, Treasury, ASIC are looking to update their legislation, but also to continue providing, incorporating the current regime into upcoming legislation. At the end of the day, the AFSL regime is fit for purpose, and I do believe that it does have the capability to regulate crypto products with a few minor tweaks. But we'll see what legislation they come up with and how they go about regulating it appropriately. And as I mentioned before, at a federal level, there is a huge focus on scam protection. Unfortunately, these areas make it unlikely that the Australian landscape will progress as smoothly as we've seen overseas. There will be a heightened focus on what the federal government can do to protect Australian consumers from both domestic and overseas scammers. Just down the bottom here, I've got a couple of the screenshots from the ASIC website where they sort of release their media releases on some of the cases that they've been announcing to the public that they're prosecuting. So we've got ASIC suing Block Owner for providing unlicensed products, ASIC suing BPS Financial for, providing misleading statements about coin, and then Find a Wallet being sued for unlicensed conduct and inadequate risk disclosure over their own product, which is the equivalent of their staking product. So these are sort of the external public-facing messages that we're hearing from ASIC. And then on a private side, we're hearing also a lot of, DCEs, bigger developers in the space. They're getting letters and notices from ASIC saying, we think you're doing this particular thing. Tell us why you're not. So there is a bit of, and it's unfortunate to say, there is a bit of a regulation through enforcement vibe going on in Australia. It's no way to the extent that what's happening in the US, but there is definitely soft lawmaking happening through ASICs dealing with the public. Just here, and I'm not going to delve into a deep level with this, but I've sort of compiled a bit of a summary of what some of the other jurisdictions are doing at this point of time. Now, we've got some jurisdictions which are doing fantastic stuff, and we've got some absolute stinkers. So it's, we've got it all. On the great side, we've got the UK and the EU. So the UK, I think it was 29th of June, they just passed the Financial Services and Markets Bill, which creates a whole fit-for-purpose financial regulatory regime, which does encompass crypto assets used for financial services. It doesn't try and broach DeFi, which is a common thread in all the sort of leading nations. There's not a lot of focus on regulating DeFi simply because it's too bloody hard to do so. On the other end of the spectrum, we've got the United States. I'm sure everyone's heard a lot of the chatter that's coming out of there. SEC's charging ahead with their regulatory action against Binance and Coinbase for offering securities without the appropriate licensing. And it's interesting to see in the US, you've got two large regulators, the SEC and the CFTC, who are both scrambling and seemingly operating at ends with each other. They're both trying to claim jurisdiction over financial products that are crypto-based, but unfortunately, there's no real guidance on what they classify as a security asset for a crypto product. So they're sort of, as you would have seen in the Coinbase and the Binance cases, they're just starting these proceedings without really giving any guidance on what you need to do to comply with their current laws. Now, I'm not a United States lawyer, but it's interesting to note what they're doing overseas because, we live in a global economy, and what our sort of nations overseas are also doing will impact how we progress and develop our legislation here. Because at the end of the day, we do have to have legislation that provides for Australian investors to enter a global market. And if I suppose the converse is also true. We want to attract global investment into the Australian market. And if our legislation regulation is too complex, too hard, we'll miss out on that opportunity. Over in the APAC region, we've got Hong Kong and Singapore doing some really cool stuff. Hong Kong was a bit of a hotspot. It cooled off, but now it's heating up again. They recently released their licensing regime, which sort of provided for centralized exchanges to provide non-security tokens and a whole licensing regime behind that. But interestingly, on the sort of, it's not really in the public domain, but the Hong Kong Monetary Authority recently sent out some letters to basically all of the banks operating in Hong Kong, asking them why they weren't providing banking products to DCE providers. So a bit of an issue that we've got globally right now is, and particularly in Australia, is debanking. And, crypto providers, crypto product providers unfortunately getting debanked because they're deemed to be too risky in terms of AML, CTF, or not having the proper licenses. But interestingly, the Hong Kong Monetary Authority directly said to these banks and spoke to them and said, why aren't you providing these relevant banking powers to these people? Really interesting take. And those particular banks in Hong Kong are dancing a fine line between they want to comply with, you know, the overarching AML CTF regime, but then they've also got pressure from the Monetary Authority telling them to provide banking services to particular people. That's really the basis of what I wanted to cover today. I'm happy to sort of field any questions now or at the end. I believe we've got Simon coming up. Yeah.
Joni actually has a question or a comment she'd like to make in response to yours. Joni, are you there? Joni, if you'd like to unmute.
Yes, I'm still here.
You just can't get enough, can you, Joni? You've got young waiting in the wings, but she's so dedicated to the task. So she just got a comment, and maybe there'll be some interesting byplay here between Will and Joni. I'll give them
respectful byplay. No, it was just that to clarify one of Will's comments about the TradFi or I guess the existing AFSL regime pretty much being fit for purpose for crypto. I strongly disagree with that. Most of the day I spend understanding the nature of a blockchain protocol, its consensus mechanism, whenever a new crypto token is launched on a blockchain, what the specific nuances and risks of that token are. And none of that technology stuff is, in my view, embodied in the existing AFSL requirements or financial services regulation. And it requires a big lift. So even if traditional finance players are very familiar with the existing AFSL regime, certainly they're not familiar with the lift that it takes to understand the technology and get the technology risk disclosures up to scratch so that consumers are adequately warned about what can go wrong at the network, what can go wrong with the different models of governance around that network, and how crypto tokens are used in the different types of activities in those global networks. So I respectfully but strongly disagree with that. And even if it's built into the existing AFSL regime, the requirements, you just can't copy and paste from what you know in traditional finance to just overnight understand the technology. So I just really think it's an important message. And a lot of banks and existing traditional finance players would love the AFSL regime to have a slight tweak, but having practiced in the industry for the last 7 years, my experience says that that will not be the case.
Thank you very much, Joni. I don't know if some of you know, but last Friday night, Joni was vigorously debating. So I'm hesitant to get into another debate with her. But yeah. Yeah. Look, I think there are split views in this industry, as I'm sure, yeah, as Joni said, there's plenty of different views about this. What I have sort of canvassed and what I have proposed and what we've sort of submitted in our recommendations to government is not an overnight fix. And I think that's impossible to do. I think there does need to be a significant uplift to the regime, but I do think the underlying way that we regulate products at a product level is fit for purpose, in the sense that at the end of the day, crypto assets can be expressed in the form of financial products, and they do specific things within our regime. Obviously, that needs a bit of tweaking, and our current financial system was based on technology and sort of historical, antiquated, outdated views, and the technology is developing really, really fast. So there will have to be significant improvements, amendments, uplifts to the current regime. But I will say that I think that the the amendments and the proposals that will come through are likely, if not certainly, to be an uplift to the AFSL regime.
Thank you, Will. That was most excellent. Thank you, Will. And next up, we have Simon Ho. I think for future, sorry, Daniel. No, Joni. Yeah, so, yep. No, but I think we could, as Danielle suggested, quite easily have a future of digital asset regulation debate. If we're going to have a DAO debate, the great DAO debate, as they had at the Oshie Gallery in Melbourne on Friday. Oh, well, yeah, actually, yeah, show of hands. I think some of the lawyers would. I think I certainly would. No, that's good. We're going to throw to Simon, my colleague from CoinStash. Joe, if you would bring up Simon's slides, please, Josiah. Thank you so much. We're on to Simon's slides. Simon is going to spend a brief 5 minutes, if you could, Simon, giving us a quick view, maybe from the product lens is what I've sort of tasked Simon with. Simon is the Chief Operating Officer of CoinStash, one of our local exchanges, doing it for Southeast Queensland once again. We're very proud, and no offense to our interstate viewers or attendees. And Simon was in a previous life an expert on all things tax, if I'm not mistaken, at businesses such as Kaufland and others. He has quite a diverse background, but finds himself fully ensconced in crypto world. I'm going to shut up. It's Simon Ho from CoinStash.
Yeah, thanks everyone. So a bit of a background about myself. I'm a lawyer, but not practicing. I'm a registered tax agent, and but also not practicing. But I have worked in the past in those areas. I first fell into crypto into Bitcoin 2014, 13-ish, and then moved full time in 2021. So it's been about 2 years now, full time. My role at CoinStash is to look after basically everything except marketing and product. So like, tech side product. And Ting's the CEO, and Minar Theodoro, the two co-founders. They're both based in Brisbane too. Well, I'll call myself sort of an optimistic cynic. So my comments today are sort of from that perspective. I also don't have a filter on sometimes, so it's stream of consciousness. And everything I say today is not really resonating CoinStash. It's sort of my personal view, having worked in the industry for some time. So firstly, I was preparing this slide, and I was trying to distill into one message I was trying to get across today. And after listening to all the speakers speak today and what they've spoken about, I think what I like to sort of hope you guys get away from my talk today is that last dot point. If you don't have customers, you don't have a business. If you don't have a business, you have there's no consumers to protect, and then therefore regulation becomes a bit moot. In a way, I mean, there's still strict liability offenses. So if you mislead and deceive customer and scam and fraud them, even though it might be $100,000, you might end up with a fine or worst case jail. And as a builder in the space, yes, we want to provide value to our customers, but I think most people would also don't want to land in jail themselves. I mean, one example is back in, I think it was late last year, one of the decentralized perpetuals exchanges, DYDX, started to talk about bringing out KYC. They were originally a non-KYC exchange. I think there was a huge furore about that. They're saying you should be, disobeying the law, not complying to the law, because you should be fighting the SEC or fighting the anti-money laundering authority there. But at the end of the day, the founders themselves and the people working the business don't want to risk their personal freedom. And that's my personal view. So we want to be compliant for that reason. The incentive is to not give up our freedom, but at the same time, it wasn't provide value to our customers. So first things first is being compliant is super important because that's the only way to operate a sustainable business. And I've had the benefit of working both from a regulatory perspective at the ATO and also policy development and also in business as advising on the other side. So I've been on all three sides. And I think regulators have a difficult job. They're meant to enforce the law that's written at a particular point in time. And at the moment, there's a debate about what the law should be, not what the law is. Well, take that back. There's a lot of discussion around whether the current laws fit crypto assets, and different views, yes, no, but a lot of discussion also about what the law should be in the future. So what does that mean from a business perspective? First, be compliant, obviously. There's stuff that's black and white, like don't scam people. If the token that you're launching is clearly going to be a share, for example, or a product like a share that's paying out dividends and people are going to speculating on the future value of it, then don't launch it, probably. But at the same time, it's a double-edged sword because there's also there's opportunities there in this sort of gray area, and I think a lot of businesses have taken advantage of that gray area. Say Binance, for example, they've grown to their size because they've taken some calculated risks about what they think they can and can't do versus regulatory resources to clamp down on them. A lot of exchanges in Australia have been operating for some time without a regulatory framework, even though on one side, lawyers might say, you should be getting this license, you should be getting that license, but customers on the other side say, we want the service. So in the middle, what do you do? It's all a risk-based judgment, but at the same time, don't break the law. So next point, runway. Let's say you raised an angel round of say $500,000. The token that you're going to launch is quite complex. It's got a lot of features in there that resemble security, or maybe not a security, or maybe governance, whatever. There's lots of stuff in there. Do you spend $50,000 on a legal advice, or would you sort of spend $10,000 on sort of getting like a not so much a detailed opinion, but you know what I mean. Like you don't need to overspend before you even build a product, because by the time you've spent say $50,000, $100,000 on lawyers' fees, maybe you're not shutting down the project, and you. Building an MVP, testing the waters a little bit, while still staying compliant. And then if it does get to a point where there's a lot of demand for my product, then okay, what can I do to sort of future-proof this? Sometimes launching a token might be too late already because it's out in public, but yeah, I mean, a lot of exchanges have done that already, right? Location, Australia versus overseas. There's lots of benefits to launching in Australia from business perspective. You got R&D, so you say developers costing $200,000. Tax rebate, you especially get 6% or 40% of that back. So that becomes $120,000. But of course, bit harder to manage if they're overseas. But yeah, you get the benefit of them in Australia. And the market. So overseas is definitely a bigger market. Australia, it's small, but it's an important market. But yeah, I'm not sure what else to say on that one. But except post-Astra, we're only targeting Australian customers because it's a big enough market for us for now. And most of our customers are people who trade crypto. Or they run a business and they use crypto in the business, whether it's money remittance or whatever. But yeah, there's definitely a big market in Australia, but bigger overseas. No customers, no business. Yeah, that's basically it. I'll like to leave some time for questions because I'm sure lots of people have questions for exchanges. Yeah, I'm done. Yep.
All right. If anyone's been to my events before, I know everyone gets antsy pants at about, the 45-minute mark, but I know that there's a lot of questions, and you had a fantastic question earlier. And I want to hear more of them, but I'm also very mindful that there's some people in the room that want to have another drink and want to network and want to socialize. So I have a couple of ideas. What we're going to do is, first of all, I saw a lot of people taking a lot of photos today. These slides, they are for the community. So everybody that RSVP tonight, I will email them to you, or we will email them to you. So you will have them. So I know they went through a lot of different information. Secondly, hopefully some of our hosts that were here tonight might be able to answer some of your questions. I know we have some online. I'd love to go through all of them, but not everyone finds the legal questions as exciting as some that are asking the questions. So they may be kind enough to respond to those. So we'll try to get a little bit of some sort of forum discussion and answering those questions for you. But before we wrap it up tonight, is this the last slide? This is our next event. No, so just leave it on there. So this is our next event. If you want to come along to that, please RSVP. Now, the second thing I would like to know, who here in this room is either, first of all, I'm going to ask two questions. Who here in the room has a startup in the crypto or blockchain space? Just out of curiosity. Couple of hands. Okay. And who here is working for one? Maybe they're not actually, it's not their startup, and we have a couple. Great. Well, this information, if you don't know about it already, there is the Gold Coast Innovation Awards that are happening at the end of the month, July, the end of this month, right, Erin? So not a lot of people know about it. You do not need to be a Gold Coast-based business to nominate yourself for this award. You just need to be building in the space and solving some sort of problem. So Erin, who is here tonight, has some, you can stand up, Erin. He has some information on it, and he's got some pamphlets. So go ahead and hand those out. Maybe even Jennifer or Rachel behind you, our lovely volunteers for ATB. Do you ladies want to just take a handful and maybe pass them around for anybody that wants it? If you know of a business, okay, or if you're in the industry, or even if you have a friend of a friend, this is an opportunity locally for them to get acknowledged for the startup or that they're working for. So please take a look at that and get them to nominate, because you can only start being recognized or win these types of awards if you actually go through that effort and apply for them. I think that's pretty much it for me, unless Matt, you have anything else, unless I've missed anything. But I'd like to say thank you very much for everyone coming down. We hope to see you at our future events. If this is your first event, we host them on the first Wednesday of every month, unless there's some sort of special occasion happening. But generally, we'll always be here on the first Wednesday of every month. So thank you very much, everyone. Please stay around. We'll stay around for about till 8 o'clock, have some more drinks. If there's not a drink in the wells, it's your home. Open up the fridge, see what's inside there. If it's in the fridge, it's yours. So thank you very much, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your evening. Oh, and thank you to all the online people for joining. It's a new thing, live streaming. Also, everyone, if you RSVP and you can't attend, you may get the link to the live stream, but we're not doing online events. So you need to RSVP and we'll send you the live stream, and it is being recorded. Thank you.